Listening to the Real Estate Financial Coach podcast, financial planning topics for real estate investors. This is the Real Estate Financial Coach podcast, and I'm Cynthia Meyer. I'm here today with Terrance Hutchins, who incorporates real estate and tax planning into his practice. He's got a really interesting story to tell. Terrance, tell us what's important to know about you.
Hi, Cynthia. Thanks for having me. I've been in finance for about 15 years. I worked with a couple different brokers earlier on in my career as I was just learning the industry. I started my tax office about 8 years back and have now started an RIA. I'm located in Frisco, Texas. So I just registered that back in May of last year. And so we have, I would say, really simplified our offering. So I'd say I'm more of a personal CFO to individual business owners or real estate investors. And now we offer business CFO offerings to strictly businesses that are looking to help grow and scale.
So, how did you incorporate real estate into your personal balance sheet and into your business?
So something I just started learning probably 6, 7 years ago more heavily. So a lot of people, they do the bigger pockets, they start reading books. So that was me listening to podcasts.
The real
And
estate curious.
exactly. So I started to just get more education and then started talking more about it with clients. And a lot of people are looking to get more into real estate. And it was just a natural thing for me to incorporate. During the pandemic, I actually thought, hey, you know what? Everyone says you just got to start. You got to do something because the education alone isn't enough to really give you the proper perspective. I actually flipped a couple of houses during actually post-COVID. So did pretty well on a few of those projects. And then we bought a rental. And so now I'm looking at slowly growing the rental portfolio, mostly into B or A class single family. And then once we probably got to about 6 to 8 properties, I might upgrade to more of a multifamily offering.
Do you manage your own doors?
Yes, my wife is actually a real estate agent.
Oh, I didn't know
She's
that.
not,
That's very
yeah,
cool.
so
Yeah.
she mostly does a lot of the management. She's not super active as far as her kind of personal business, but she certainly represented us, helped us save money, and allows us to get good information.
Mhm. So, you have some real estate investing experience yourself, and so you're a real estate couple, if you will. How did that translate into serving real estate investors in your business? About what percentage of folks in your book invest in real estate, and what are some of the kinds of things you do for them?
I've actually looked at this, so I'd probably say probably half of our clients are either full-time or they have some type of real estate in their portfolio. So for me, it was more about figuring out what would be helpful because I think having the experience of actually doing it yourself, I think about, okay, what would I want? Because I'm very analytical and methodical with how I do things. So I'm thinking, if I would want this, I'm sure I could bring that to other people, but I just have to present it in a different way so that the average person would be able to absorb it because the average person's not want to look at spreadsheets all day, of course. And I thought through just the idea of how do I onboard someone. So I thought we got to help them with one, organizing, like where everything is going, because once you have one property on top of your other life, you've created a situation that you have to now organize. So it's thinking about, okay, how do we organize their portfolio? How do we measure the performance on each property individually and then as a whole? And then how do we help them create a criteria for how they're going to grow and scale? Because oftentimes, and you probably experienced this with real estate professionals, every deal is a good deal if the numbers in their head make sense. But if it doesn't necessarily line up with their life objectives, then it may not be a good deal for them. So getting them out of that mindset of just acquiring stuff just to have it and saying, okay, what do we actually want to get out of this? And how does our portfolio currently lend to that? And then what adjustments do we need to make potentially in the future so that we have a synergy between our buying decisions, our selling decisions, and our personal life and objectives.
So everything is completely aligned. So do you have just carrying that forward a little bit, do you have steps or a particular transformation that you take your real estate investor clients through? What does that look like?
I think it really starts with trying to understand their story. How did you get into real estate? Why did you buy the property that you bought? What do you currently use to determine why you buy a property? Because many times they have some level of sophistication. And if you come in with I know everything, then it doesn't give you the opportunity to really become a collaboration with them. And I found that let me learn what they do. Let me say, hey, actually, this is really good. I can actually learn from them in some respects. But hey, let's also dissect what is our tax strategy now and moving forward, and what is the minimum performance we want to get out of our property. And I think if we can have at least a plan on those two things, that'll help them with what decision did I do to buy this property? And if it's underperforming, can I identify why that is? And then helping them with how long should I keep it if it's underperforming? Or if I can't rent a property out, how long should I keep it before it makes sense to probably sell it? So just helping them with some of the decision making to where it's a little bit more systematic and it can be more data driven so that it more so simplifies it for them. And sometimes they just need validation. They might be on the right track, but they like having someone in their corner that can just give them the okay or pat on the back to say, hey, this is actually a good deal. And
This
that
looks good to
validation helps
me.
them to move forward.
That's interesting. So, how did you, in your financial planning practice, how did you evolve to become a CFO, an outsourced CFO, or a business CFO, or a personal CFO?
I guess that's a marketing term in a sense on the personal side. Now, on the business side, my degree is actually in entrepreneurship. When I was in college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do per se. Initially, I was going to go to law school, but business intrigued me. So I went and did entrepreneurship, learned how to put together like a business plan and all that. And I wouldn't say that I was totally aware of what it actually meant to start and grow a business, but I at least had a foundation and the intrigue. So going into essentially a broker world where you're self-employed, but you have to follow a process, you have to manage your time and manage your cash flow and all that stuff. So starting to get some of that information through experience now led me to just continue to evolve and to learn just the aspect of business. So we say, okay, there's 6 aspects or 6 components of business, and we have a plan for each of those. And I just hone in more so on the financial side because a lot of people, when it comes to numbers, they understand that they're important, but they are intimidated oftentimes, and they don't necessarily have a great frame of reference to how they make decisions in relation to their financial numbers. Going back to, can we have a connection between your business strategy and your financial decision? And helping them with how much money they want to take out of the business, how much money should they reinvest, what they should be spending on employees, on operating expenses, understanding their percentages, their margin, and ultimately, if they eventually want to sell their business, like what multiple could they probably command? And so I think that is more of my passion, looking at this business as a puzzle and how we move these pieces around to create this picture that the business owner ultimately wants.
So, as planning for real estate investors is really a tax focused engagement. So, you certainly have a leg up as a tax professional, right? How do you coach your clients who own investment properties, for example, on the tax aspects of being a real estate investor and how to optimize that?
Gotcha. So one, it's understanding what are their perceptions, specifically now with the internet and reels and TikTok and all that stuff. There's a lot of education that goes on that's either incorrect or it's incomplete. So
Yes.
getting an idea of what is their understanding of how real estate is benefiting them from a tax standpoint, getting them just the fundamental, but also just reiterating that I don't want to have them make decisions that are tax focused. Really, there's a lot of incentive in the tax code that will benefit real estate just doing anything. Now, the strategy comes in where it could be a matter of timing or whatnot that we can help guide them through. But I want to start with let's not let tax guide our decisions because that's how they could sometimes get in trouble or buy stuff that's not in line with what they ultimately want to do. But educating them one on just maximizing their current efficiency. So we have to look at their tax return, we evaluate their Schedule E or their partnership tax returns to make sure that they're one, just taking all the natural deductions that they could. How are they documenting things now? What might be slipping through the cracks? And if they do have a good relationship with the CPA, can we get on the same page with them so that we can help? Essentially, as we're going to be more of the strategist and I would say the reviewer, helping them to say, hey, can we collaborate with you? So we're not necessarily trying to take over their business. And in fact, if I didn't file an additional tax return, I wouldn't complain. I wouldn't say at capacity per se, but I'm really selective if I take on any additional tax people in the office.
Hmm.
But knowing that, hey, I do have this background. Can I work alongside your CPA? Because ultimately, I want them to do a good job so that I wouldn't have to necessarily do it. Because a lot of people they well, hey, can you just do it? And I'm like, hey, can we stay on this side and help you with the strategy? But if it doesn't get implemented properly, then it doesn't really make that big of a difference.
And sure, any financial planner hopefully is helping to translate between tax and the way that ordinary people just think about their money. But being able to bring that perspective to the relationship, I would think would be really valuable. When you started your financial planning practice, and then there are lots of financial planners who are listening to this and want to know, like, how did you land on this niche? Who do you feel called to serve in your practice, if I may use that expression?
Kind of going back to the business aspect, I think the
Mhm.
people that buy real estate, I think they need to evaluate it like they're running a business.
For
And if
sure.
they have that perspective, then they're probably going to, one, just be willing to do some of the stuff that most people don't want to do, like bookkeeping, or at least having a system for how you do that.
Separating accounts.
Yeah, exactly. Not
Yeah.
committing what they're doing, not just being lazy about tracking their performance.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times a property may not be performing very well, but the owner won't know that. And many times it's because they don't think about that $3,000 expense or that $1,000 expense that is continually coming up, dragging away from their cash flow. Because in their mind, I'm charging $2,000 for rent, and then the mortgage is 1,500. And so
Mm.
all the other things in between, they don't really, it doesn't impact them as much. So they're not truly making $500 a month in cash flow per se. And then on the flip side, sometimes, hey, if we raise our rent, that's another thing we help them do, is to make sure that they're charging market rent. If they have kids that have been there a while, sometimes it's easy to just renew and not keep it up. Helping them to have more of a professional approach is how we talk to them with how they manage their stuff. And that also includes being a good tenant, or sorry, being a good landlord. What is their process on how they screen tenant not being lackadaisical? I can even
Mhm.
see this in my situation, where if you go through a lull where you have to turn the property over, don't compromise your tenant just because you have an emotional moment where you want to get the property rented out, and so you might lower your
Right.
standards.
You
And
wanna make sure you do good tenant screening and that you
right,
follow the fair housing laws and
exactly. So just helping them have a more professional, I would say, approach to how they are managing things. And then knowing that, hey, we're in your corner to help you before you make decisions. And ideally, my job is to not talk you out of things. My job is to help collaborate with you to make sure that whatever decision you make is ultimately the best for you in your personal situation.
do you think most financial planners should know about real estate investors? As we're in study group together, you were part of
Mhm.
the real estate financial coach course, and there aren't very many of us who work with real estate investors as a target of their
Mhm.
practice. What do you think our colleagues should know about this type of investor?
Some of the feedback I've gotten or seen from people when they invest in real estate, they'll say, the advisor told me I should sell it and buy stock. I think off the top, that's just a horrible advice just from the
Yes.
beginning. Now, maybe they could eventually do that, especially if they're looking at downsizing at the end. Maybe it is easier to just passively own stocks and get a yield from that. But number one, say, okay, let me not go in with any preconceived advice. So let me understand, okay, what does this client actually want? And sometimes they may not like the stock market, but a lot of times it's either education, and a lot of times it is also control. They in their minds, they just have a lot more control over the properties that they have. And so it's not, so I think it's going in open minded with, hey, I'm gonna be agnostic with what I'm gonna advise this person. I'm just gonna listen to them, understand their situation, and then give them objective advice that I feel fits with what they're trying to do. Sometimes if it makes more sense to say, hey, look, you're only making 1% of this property. It's not in a great area. Maybe we do need to go ahead and sell it. And if we don't have interest rates being high right now, if there's not like a great funnel for them to buy something that is within their criteria, maybe they do invest in stock for a period of time. But I think me talking to someone through that process is a byproduct of me learning what they're trying to do. And then them trusting that, okay, I'm giving them the advice that I would do in my own situation.
That's right. And if we as financial planners, if we think of it as a business, real estate as a business, you would never tell a business owner who owned a chain of hair salons
Mhm.
or like my grandfather owned a Texaco station. You wouldn't
Yeah.
have told him to sell one of his Texaco stations and put the money in stocks. So at least not right off the bat. Like
Right.
that probably isn't appropriate in most circumstances for advisors to think of the real estate investor or rental property owner as a
Mhm.
business owner. It's a helpful paradigm.
Yep, for sure.
what do you think real estate investors should know about financial planners?
I think we're not all the same. The challenge in our industry is that there is no minimum standard for
Mm,
calling yourself a financial planner. And for the consumer, they're not just going to know the nuance of this person and what they do and how they get compensated. I think one, understanding, okay, we're not all the same, but there are people that do serve their niche or their industry. And it's just a matter of trying to find the person that kind of fits with what they're looking for them to do or their service model.
mm,
And part of the positive in the industry is that more people are specializing, similar to
mm.
attorneys or physicians, where they're not trying to do everything, but they're also saying, hey, this is my specialty and I can serve people in that specialty better because that's all I focus on. And I think having the consumer understand that, okay, there is someone who might actually speak my language already versus me having to educate them on the front end. We as an industry, hopefully, will create more of a minimum standard or at least have some type of criteria that says, okay, if you're going to call yourself this, then you at least have to do X. So that as consumers, when this person over here that says I'm a financial planner, but essentially they sell products. And that's what a lot of the industry is. And not that there's a bad thing with selling products, but there's just a different focus, I would say, when you're in that situation versus when you are basically just giving out advice, let's say.
If you were to tell your financial planner colleagues who were looking to understand more about real estate, any resources you would point them to?
Really a lot. So I guess I have to roll through. If we're talking about specific to real estate and tax, I pay for research. So I have a CCA Connect membership. I also am a part of NATP or National Association of Tax Professionals. AITPA puts out stuff. So sometimes it could be just webinars. I know Bigger Pockets has a few tax related books that they self published that or tax strategy guide. Bradford Institute is one that's good. Real estate TPA, or I think it's REI, they have some good educational stuff out there
Yes.
that you could access. So some things you could find for free. So those are some of the avenues where you could probably find some free resources. And then as you start getting a little bit more advanced, then you might, decide to start pay for something just to have you have a little bit more specialty. But on the real estate side, generally there's going to be understanding like the Schedule E form, understanding things like real estate professional status, passive activity losses, the passive activity limitation, partnership, tax law, basis. Those are going to be, I would say, a lot of what you might look at: installment sales, 1031 exchanges, cost segregation studies. Those are just specific topics. So if you're saying, hey, if I want to start learning about real estate tax, I probably could go through some of those just topical things and start learning about those specifically. And then I'll broaden out from there.
So you've gone through most of the real estate financial coach course. Is there anything in particular that you found useful about the course and the program?
Yeah, so it was definitely good to be able to connect with other people who are in that same focus, hearing about just tools that they use and then strategies that they have and then conversation. So it was good that we had case studies that we could go through and dissect. This is my perspective on how I look at this, but just hearing someone else who may have not a wrong, just a different approach. You might not be diametrically opposed to it, but it might be just a different way that they thought about it.
Mhm.
So just having a 360 view, I would say, how different advisors look and approach situation. And because I think the good thing is, and especially in our group, I think we had an abundance that we were always looking to try to help each other out and understanding that there's plenty of people out there for all of us to work with, not feeling that, well, I can't give out my quote unquote secret because really you don't have secrets. Someone else is probably doing it. They may not be doing it like you're doing it, but we all have the ability to help each other out and to be able to ultimately give each other ideas that we can help implement. And then the consumer ultimately is better as a result.
That's right, because we're all collaborating and sharing and learning from each other. And that it improves the profession or this niche in the profession all the more so that we can develop some standardized ways of approaching certain situations. It's been wonderful. It's been wonderful to have you part of the course and contributing to these discussions and bringing your special expertise to the table. I think it's been extremely useful. Just stepping back for a second, if we were to have this conversation, say 15 or 20 years from now, and everything in your practice has worked out exactly the way that you wanted it to, what does it look like?
Wow. That's a very good question. I think about that from time to time. I said my perfect job, if I was like a little kid, I said I would have been a shark on Shark Tank.
I
To
can
that
see that. I
point,
can totally see that.
getting to that point, there would have been a lot of stuff that it would have had to gone right. And so for me, hey, I have this basically business background where I can have built up my own business successfully and then help other businesses grow and scale. And then I also parlay some of my business profits into buying up real estate and being able to just pass that expertise on to other people. So I think my passion is teaching. Actually, we'll take a step back. I say my passion is learning, and then teaching allows me to manifest that. And having the ability to take information and really boil it down for other people, because I think that's where I get the most satisfaction from, is being able to help people connect what might be considered complex topics into actionable items for them so that ultimately their lives get better. I can't tell you for sure what that looks like. Maybe I can make a guest appearance. I don't know. But that was my
internet now.
So we'll see what happens.
I think that's wonderful. And so where can we find you online?
So I am on LinkedIn, Instagram, Logos Financial, LOGOS Financial. I have actually started a podcast with my daughter. I think I mentioned to you before. It's called the Kid CEO Podcast. We just launched that.
That's so great.
We're talking about business principles. And so she wanted to start her own lemonade stand. So we actually put together a business plan. And it gave me an opportunity, one, to spend some time with her. And we'll just see where that goes over time. But my goal is to be able to interview other kids and maybe even collaborate with them on how they can start their businesses. If I can explain concepts to a 9-year-old, then I can explain a concept to an adult. Oftentimes, many adults, they think they should know things, but they may not. And so they're not as direct in just asking what some people might call a dumb question. Even though no question is really dumb.
There are no dumb questions.
You're figuring out, okay, what's the gap in what you understand and what's the reality. So that's been some fun, but you can find me on the internet, on LinkedIn and Instagram is probably where I post the most. And so I thank you for having me and look forward to collaborating with you down the road on some of the future stuff with real estate financial coach.
Thank you for coming to talk to us today. And we look forward to hearing your podcast and having you back on again.
Awesome.
Thanks.
I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks. Bye.